So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our resourcing opening conference. Great that you're able to join us. Goodness me, wouldn't it have been wonderful to have handshakes and hugs in Brussels, but it wasn't to be. So our next best thing is to be doing a virtual conference on Zoom. Congratulations on navigating your path to us. My name is Peter Woodward. I'm an independent facilitator. My passion is around that journey towards sustainable development. So it's a real privilege to help navigate our way through 2 days. We hope that are going to be rich in considering from all angles the whole journey towards responsible sourcing. Just a couple of guidelines to help us through the next 2 days. First of all, we are all connected into the Zoom because we want you to be able to use the chat function, and we're going to go into breakouts on 1 or 2 occasions. So if you can just make sure, both speakers and participants, that you're muted and that your cameras are turned off unless you are star of the show at a particular moment. We kind of suggest that the speaker view on the top right-hand corner will give you the best impression on your machines, both of any slides and of who is speaking. Just a reminder also that this whole conference is being recorded and also broadcast on YouTube, just so that you are aware of that. Through the conference, you're able to either ask questions or make comments on the chat function. Helps if you just say who you are and also maybe preface it with comment or question. But there will be points through the 2 days when we particularly invite you to make comments. It's great even now to see the chat function working, and I see we're connected right across the world. Brunei, Singapore, Belarus, Germany, even from the UK, hi. And that's one of the upsides of this function of Zoom, is that we are able maybe to democratize the process and get more people engaging. And we hope over the 2 days, we expect up towards 400 people have registered for this event. So we hope the messages will spread far and wide. Just one other thing in terms of the guidelines: if you have an issue, technical or otherwise, as we go through, then on the chat function, if you could just contact. Lovely. So I don't know at what point I got muted by some automatic system, but I'm now unmuted, so that's great. I hope you've heard something of what I've said. But what I'd like to do right at the outset, in order to frame this conference, but in fact the whole program, is to invite Andrea Martinuzzi to say hello. Andrea is founding director of the Institute for Managing Sustainability at the Vienna University of Economics and Business, and is the overall project coordinator. Andre, great to have you with us online. Good to see the connection with Vienna is there, and wonderful again to be working on a program that I think has such relevance at this time. So really just to hear from you a welcome and an overview of that drive of the resourcing project.
Hello and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you come from. Great to have you here. Well, not so great that we can't see each other, but Peter already said these are new times, and perhaps this will also be the new normal after the COVID crisis, because this is an opportunity also to link stakeholders just across the world, just around the world, without traveling around, without having any kind of climate impact. So I think it's not so bad to talk about sustainability and not having a large climate impact by traveling. My name is Andreas Martinuzzi. I'm head of the Institute for Managing Sustainability in Vienna at a large university, the Vienna University of Economics and Business. And together with my team, we've been organizing conferences and running large European projects for more than 10 years on resource efficiency, on mining policy, and on circular economy. And this event today is important for us because it's a starting event for another big European project that, well, it's not a starting event. We already had some minor events before, but it's the big conference in the beginning. I want to thank my team for putting together such an interesting, inspiring, high-level program. Especially I would like to thank Andreas, Endl, Alexander Graf, and Noel and Baria, and all the partners in the resourcing project, and you, Peter. Again, I'm sure for the next 2 days, you will have the right spirit to push us into interesting discussions, to push us to the boundaries wherever they are. Why is it important to talk about resourcing? Well, actually, we need to break unsustainable trends. That's what we know. And the COVID crisis is just a little wave. If we have a look at the bigger wave, which is the climate crisis, the even bigger wave, which is the unsustainable development crisis, and we have to contribute to implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. And sourcing is part of the biophysical layer, part of this layer that's really down to earth, down to the ground. We can talk about strategies and agendas and roadmaps and policies and governance and indicators and all of that stuff. But when it comes down to earth, then it's really important that this is what we will do right here. So what we will do is what we've already done. We involve stakeholders. We involved quite a lot of stakeholders, business sector, civil society, researchers, policymakers, all around the value chain. And if I have a look at the list of participants who registered for this event, we see more than 30 countries from all around the world that are currently or will be represented today and tomorrow. Together, we have to find a common ground. There are different approaches, different business action, large-scale government interventions, grassroots initiatives by NGOs, all of them trying to deal with the issues of dealing with sourcing, dealing with the different resources we use. But do we all understand the same by responsible sourcing? So if we talk about responsible sourcing, it's easy to say responsible, but responsible for what? Responsible towards whom? How far does this responsibility go? Who in these quite complex chains is responsible for what? And how can we develop a holistic view on responsible sourcing that we can share? If we share a common ground, how can we coordinate our actions for responsible sourcing better in the future without impeding each other? And if we coordinate our actions, how can we ensure that we have real and meaningful impacts that affect the people on the ground, that create value for business, and that create a level playing field for competitiveness? This is what we are aiming for. What you can expect during the next 2 days? Well, first of all, we will cover aspects of awareness and advocacy. This is the civil society, this is the NGO part, how to make frontline communities heard, how to make them respected in the process towards responsible sourcing. How can we create long-lasting win-win situations through critical but yet constructive engagement? And we expect a keynote presentation by Marc Dumais from Amnesty International in a few moments, and we will have some interesting panel discussions later on. Then we will cover business aspects about how to, about challenges and opportunities in strengthening competitiveness. And also we will cover the issue of benchmarking. Benchmarking is an important term for businesses. Businesses like to benchmark, and we will cover this, inspired by a keynote by Alexander Nick from BMW. Then we will talk about the policy angle, the regulations and the standards, the interplay between policies and standards, and how to design them that they are mutually supportive, or to question if they are in a conflicting relationship. We will have a keynote presentation from Tyler Gillard from OSC Center for Responsible Business Conduct tomorrow. And the fourth session will be about investment in markets. Well, it's about the financial sector. It's about money. And how can we push the financial sector for more responsible sourcing? What is the role of the different ratings, impact investments, and other instruments? And we expect a keynote presentation by Andreas from the EC Platform for Sustainable Finance. So this is what you can expect. So how will it look like? Well, actually, this depends how it looks like at your place. Might look like that, then you're quite happy. Might look like that, then your dog is happy. Might look like that, quite a happy family, or it might look like that. This is the way how work looks like today. We are at home. We make use of these new technologies. However, I think we can make best use of these technologies by co-creating a future we want, by setting a common ground, by initiating joint actions, and by focusing on long-lasting impact. I wish you inspiring 2 days. Thank you.
Andre, thank you very much indeed for that introduction. And just to introduce my bit of humanity, this is Martha, who is checking out that I'm following the agenda to the letter. So we hope that the enjoyment of the comfort of the home surroundings allows us to relax. But goodness me, we have got quite an agenda ahead and are really going to focus on some of those, unearthing some of those issues as we go through. Not least because this is an extraordinary time. We are living through the implications of the coronavirus. We've got major programs happening in Europe around the opening up of the Green Deal, the recovery package, huge opportunities for transition. And this conference, I hope, is really going to focus on some of those areas. Just so you can navigate the timetable for the day, in a moment, we're going to have a session really trying to bring some of the key issues onto the table. And then we're just going to have a break for 15 minutes, allow you to exercise for a moment, feed the cat. And then we're going to move straight into looking at that awareness building and advocacy session. And then after a further break, running through to looking at some of the exciting and interesting work and challenging work taking place among industry frontrunners and business alliances. So our plan is to go through and finish bang on 17:45 this afternoon, Central European time. As Andre said, it may be an entirely different time somewhere else, so we shall see. But in this first session, what I really want to do is to give you the opportunity in session one, just to get that sense of some of the key issues and thoughts that are framing the discussion as we go forward. And I have three speakers who are going to offer some insights, and then we're also going to hear a little bit more about the resourcing project. But first of all, as I said, this is a momentous time in terms of investment, particularly coming from a European perspective with the Green Deal, with the recovery funds and how that is targeted, and is that transitioning us towards green growth, green activity. And I'm delighted this morning that we have got Laurila with us. Maija is head of the unit for company law at the European Commission Directorate General for Justice and Consumers. Maija, great to have you with us. I know your expertise lies very much within corporate governance law and consumer safety and standard setting. And I think you've agreed to offer us a bit of an overview on the importance of responsible sourcing and also of due diligence for the European Union and some of the EC work on policy for mandatory corporate environmental and human rights due diligence. So Maija, great to have you with us and interested as you help us to set the scene for our conversations.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter, and also to the leaders and organizers of this resourcing opening conference. I hope my audio is on now. You can hear me? Yes, Excellent. So the program of your event looks very, very interesting and very topical, and already a lot of what you have said echoes with what I was going to say. I'm going to speak briefly about why the due diligence, as it's very much discussed today, is also so relevant for the EU and the EU legislative program. So you already referred to the European Green Deal. We started from the political guidelines of the Commission, of this current Commission mandate, setting the ambition of Europe becoming the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050. It requires the change in the way that we produce and we consume. So then came the European Green Deal at the end of 2019, and the Commission committed to tackling climate and environment-related challenges. It set the ambition to upgrade Europe's social market economy and stressed that the transition of the economy and the society must be just for all. The sustainability towards a more sustainable path has to be inclusive and just for all. Then came the COVID crisis that we all of us are experiencing in different parts of the world. And this, for our work, reinforced the calls for a true paradigm shift in order to recover sustainably from the crisis. And that requires reconciliation of the long-term systemic changes with the short-term demands. So the crisis also revealed the weaknesses of short-term oriented business models, leading to the collapse of the supply chains and related unemployment. We have witnessed also this, and you may be discussing those issues. The exhibited lack of resilience emphasized the importance of addressing problems in the global supply chains. Acting upon due diligence and thereby responsible sourcing supports this aim of the European Green Deal and the recovery plan to jointly address Europe's challenges. And there are many. I can just mention climate, biodiversity, pollution, economic and health crises, and so on. So companies, businesses play an important role in facing the current unprecedented environmental and social sustainability problems. Why do we need more stringent regulation? I talked about us working on legislation, so why? It could be summarized by one statement that we got included in a study. It was an interview to an interviewee to a study that said, it feels like we are essentially offshoring exploitation. We are sourcing from places whose conditions would be prohibited at home. This really crystallizes it. So firstly, there is the problem of free riders. The majority of the market is not taking on voluntary due diligence. Secondly, even when companies do make commitments, there is no enforcement. There is no accountability for failure to meet such commitments. And thirdly, the mix of existing different legal obligations and voluntary standards expected of companies, it's creating confusion. In the absence of EU action, what then happens is domestic legal frameworks increasingly introduce mandatory due diligence requirements in the European countries, and this leads to further fragmentation, increases costs for companies in terms of compliance, and an uneven, legally uncertain playing field. So what are we doing about it? Alongside several other work strands that are meant to improve the respect of the environment and planetary boundaries, including the respect of human rights and labor rights, now we're coming to my area. Our company law work focuses on embedding sustainability into corporate governance in view of the transformation of the economy. Sustainability in corporate governance means encouraging businesses to consider and frame their decisions in terms of their impact. Not only their impact on the company's short-term gain, but also regarding environmental, social, human, and economic impacts. And what are we doing now concretely? We had 2 external studies carried out for us, one on due diligence requirements in the supply chain, and the other one on directors' duties and sustainable corporate governance. They were both published last year, and they can be found on the internet. What did these studies find? They found that evidence that that shows the failure of voluntary action and reporting in incentivizing a change in the company behavior. There is support for mandatory due diligence, mandatory rules on sustainable corporate governance, both directors' duties and this corporate due diligence duty. And then in line with the overall Commission objective of a just transition, the Commission then put in its work program for this year, for 2021, a mention of the planned adoption of a legislative proposal on sustainable corporate governance to foster long-term sustainable and responsible corporate behavior. So this is actually a key milestone in European policy making, that something is included officially in the Commission's work program, because then it really means that the resources and the attention is put there, and the political attention confirms this initiative. We have a target date in the second quarter of this year to come out with the proposal. So the idea is that it improves EU regulatory framework on company law and corporate governance by 3 elements: enabling companies and their directors to focus on long-term sustainable value creation rather than short-term benefits, aiming to better align the interests of companies, their shareholders, but also managers, stakeholders, and the society, and then helping companies to better manage sustainability-related matters in their own operations and value chains. This is the due diligence part. And we want that also to be horizontal, covering social and human rights, climate change, environment, and so on. So that's the plan for this corporate governance initiative. It's really meant to be a holistic approach where due diligence obligation is underpinned by directors' duties. That could be about clarifying the directors, clarifying that directors should take into account the long-term interest of the company itself, as well as the interest of stakeholders, alongside the interest of shareholders, and this as part of their duty of care to act in the interest of the company. There could be also the requirement that directors integrate sustainability risks, opportunities, and impacts into the business strategy. And it could be decided that they should be setting out a horizontal corporate due diligence duty to identify, prevent, and mitigate adverse human rights, health, social, and environmental impacts in all sectors, and covering the supply chains as well. Now, the next steps, and I've finished here, is that we are consulting publicly on the different policy questions that we have open. We had already published an inception impact assessment or roadmap that showed the initial thinking. You can also find it on the internet, Have Your Say European Union, so inception impact assessment for sustainable corporate governance. And we got already a good 100, more than 100 feedback statements on that. That was the beginning, because now the impact assessment process continues as the Commission's better regulation rules require. So the public consultation itself that I already referred to is now out for comments. We expect to have a lot, and maybe, I hope, also your comments. It's open online until the 8th of February. So that you can also easily find on the internet, the link to the consultation questionnaire. And it's really open to everybody. We're asking who you represent, and then you can choose the questions that you think are relevant to you. Hopefully, very much feedback will then come that guides the political decision. And this is my scene setting for your conference, and I'm really wishing you very rich discussions. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And in many respects, it's so encouraging to hear, you know, the institutions really taking this issue seriously, reaching out to try and develop frameworks that work for all stakeholders. And I hope this conference will stimulate some further responses to the consultation. Clearly, it feels in, I don't know, 2020, 21, that we're actually, there's a sea change. This really is the future, and the spotlight is on those issues of transparency, of regulation, of standards, of guidance. So Maija, thank you very much, and we wish you well in your ongoing work, ensuring that maybe Europe is a leader in trying to ensure that we are getting that transparency and that activity right the way through the value chain. So thank you very much. But it's salutary for us to realize that there is huge impacts taking place right across the globe. And our next speaker is perfectly placed to really give us some sense of those challenges that we are facing and why responsible sourcing is an extraordinarily important and indeed overdue agenda to really push forward. Delighted to welcome to the conference Bruno Oberle. He is Director General of the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and in previous roles also has led the World Resources Forum as its president since 2015, and has been very much involved in environmental issues as Secretary of State for the Environment in Switzerland in previous manifestations. Bruno, fantastic to see you live and to connect with you. As I was mentioning, I think this is a moment of huge challenge and yet opportunity in this agenda. And I think we hope this conference is really going to jolt us into the reality of the challenges we face, but also the pathways towards the future. So the floor or the Zoom is yours to maybe offer us your perspective on that challenge and kind of where we're at a little bit. Over to you, Bruno.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Can you hear me well?
Great.
Very good. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here and to contribute to the opening of this important gathering. I am the Director General of the IUCN, but as Peter has just said, I am also the chair of the World Resources Forum Association, that is one of the organizations that contribute to this project, that has contributed and continue contributing to this project. At the same time, I'm also a panel member of the International Resources Panel, that is, let's say, the IPCC of the natural resources. So I have a view on this issue from the point of view of the regulators, from the point of view of the scientists, from the point of view of the civil society, and this is exactly what we need. This will be the main message of the next couple of slides. We need all the actors on board, because the transition from the current unsustainable sourcing to a responsible and sustainable sourcing needs everyone on board, needs the joint efforts of all the stakeholders of the process. The next slide, please. So the starting point is we need natural resources. We need a growing amount of natural resources. You see in the table, in the slides you have in front of you. you see the growth of the consumption of natural resources in the last, let's say, 45, 50 years. This is coming from the Global Resource Outlook, what it is the flagship report of the International Resources Panel that I had the privilege to lead the compilation of this document. And we see the consumption growing in this couple of years from 30,000 up to 90,000 million of tons of natural resources in the different type, biomass, fossil fuels, metals, and non-metallic minerals. And what it is important to be reminded is that it will continue the same way in the next 45, 50 years. We will have 2.5 times the amount of natural resources that we are using today in year 2060. And this is related with the growth in consumption and growth in population and growth in infrastructure of the humanity. How we generate these resources will be important, decisive for the way in which we will treat our planet, our natural platform. Next slide, please. So you see here, don't look at the detail, but this is a picture that's coming from papers that was analyzing, it is analyzing the negative and positive relation that exists between the different SDG and the mining sector, looking at the contribution, positive and negative, of the mining sector to the different SDG. What it is pretty obvious, it is if we want to get the positive objective, the ambition that the SDG are bringing with them, we need sourcing, we need natural resources. We need natural resources to create decent jobs. We need natural resources in form and food and feed to deliver an appropriate food basis for the world population. We need natural resources for everything we use, from the house to the machines, to the food, and to our free time and vacation. And this is not without impact. The extraction of natural resources, only the extraction, not the transformation, the extraction of natural resources globally is the cause of 80 to 90% of biodiversity losses globally. It is half of the impact on climate. It is a fundamental driver in the pressure that we are causing on our planet. If we don't fix the way in which we resource our economy and our lives, we will not fix the problem we have with the natural system that is on which we rely. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. This is the, let's say, the central impact on the natural system. But the use of natural resources, the extraction and the use of natural resources has a number of very important additional impacts on human rights, on child labor, on corruption, on tax evasion. And the extraction of natural resources can kill people, as we know, for example, from the tailings, from the management of the tailings, what is the waste part of the material when we extract metals from the mother rock. I was leading a project to create a standard of practice in the management of tailings, successful, I have to say, with the help of the sector, of the mining sector, of the investors, and of the public sector represented by UNEP, and it is a chronic consequence of the extraction. It is an accident in this particular construction inside mining sites that are where the tailings are stored, that in some cases can cause the loss of hundreds of human lives. For example, the last big one in Brumadinho in Brazil early last year, 300 persons killed. So the number of impact is on nature, on livelihood, on human rights, on many aspects of our life. The next slide, please. And this is less and less acceptable. It is less and less accepted by investors, for example. There is a movement away from the investment in the mining sector because investors don't want to be associated with the negative impact of the extraction of natural resources. There is less and less readiness on state to accept bad practice in the extraction and manufacturing of natural resources. And these, on the other side, prepare the ground to make the switch, prepare the ground for creating a responsible sourcing. There are different levels where we can go for a more sustainable use and management of natural resources. You can have technical solutions, how to extract and how to use the natural resources. You can manage at the end of the use phase of the natural resources of the product. You can manage the waste better. You can go in the direction of a circular economy where the waste is transformed back into a substitution of fresh natural resources. All these, like always, causes costs, causes the need to adapt production and consumption patterns, and needs therefore a certain amount of leveling it requires level playing fields. It requires similar regulation in different parts of the world, and this can be done by international agreement on specific small element or on bigger bigger issue like we did in the past with climate or biodiversity. Next slide, please. This type of regulation, this type of technology, this type of management of the processes can be supported by, on one side, by the private sector that is looking for better solution in the future, can be supported by the public sector that is looking for better regulation, and it can be supported by the consumption sector that is looking for more sustainable products. The next slide, please. And this is coming slowly together. It is, as other speakers has already pointed to, it is the right moment, probably now, to go in that direction. It is the right moment to give that whole system a push and transform it in a more just and sustainable one. In some cases, some parts of the world are already working in that direction. I could point to a piece of regulation that were passed in China, for example, to tackle the tailing issue, or in the same field in Chile. I could point and quote regulation that are passed in the United States with regard to moving the manufacturing in the direction of circular economy, or like on the slides you are looking at, the Green Deal of the European Union that will shape the recovery package after the COVID crisis. It is investment in technology. It is investing in mobility, investing in the energy sector, investing in the efficiency of building, and at the same time improving the environmental standard and the efficiency in the use of natural resources, leveraging activity and action at the different level. The next slide, please. Leveraging actions at the level of the mining sector, at the level of the processing of the raw materials, at the level of the developing of products and the marketing and selling of products, but also at the level of the end user and the sensibilization of the consumer to make the right choice, supporting the right developing of the technology. And here we are where we were at the beginning, to leave behind the unsustainable way in which natural resources were extracted, manufactured, and transformed into waste in the last 100 years. It takes time, and it needs the support of the different stakeholders in the process. We need to convince the consumer to change and to choose new type of products. We need to convince manufacturers, the productive industry, to develop new products, to invest in new productive, in new production lines, to create what the final consumer wish to buy. We need the investors to prioritize investments in this type of activity. And we need the public sector to make the appropriate regulation to support this development, to create the adequate infrastructures that will underpin and support this change. And this is the reason, because we are all here today with the different stakeholders around. It is to join forces, to exchange experiences, to exchange knowledge, and to make sure that in the future, we will work all together going in the same direction. The next slide, please. And the next one, because I am at the end of the short presentation. I thank you for the attention, and I wish you a very good conference in the next hours and days. Thank you very much. Peter, back to you.
Bruno, thank you so much. And that was a really great kind of encapsulation, both of the challenge that we face, but also that this is a moment in time where there are true opportunities to dare to really make progress in terms of responsible sourcing, because at the end of the day, from what I hear from you, everyone gains. If we do it the right way, we can all be beneficiaries, not least businesses that are involved in those value chains and those extractive industries. So I'm sure as we deepen our conversation, we'll be looking at case studies and examples, and absolutely on the resourcing program, we're still really keen that organizations like IUCN and WRF are really providing their drive and input and expertise into this. So Bruno, thank you very much. And we wish you well in your ongoing work. Goodness me, things look simple on 8 PowerPoint slides, but jolly complicated in the real world. So keep going, and thank you very much indeed, Bruno.
Thank you. Bye, Peter.
Bye. And what I'd like to do is bring our third speaker in this session Masuma Farooki, who's consulting director at Maija, and that's an independent research organization very much looking at issues around regulatory risk analysis and ratings. And Masuma, great to have you with us. I know you've been focusing on the socioeconomic impact of the resource sector and developing those frameworks for the implementation of responsible mining practices, and have a great global overview of this. And I think this morning particularly, you're going to build on what Bruno has said and really give us further sense of some of those, why our conference topic is particularly around drivers, and outline further some of those drivers towards responsible sourcing. So Masuma, great to have you with us, and look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much, Peter. I hope everyone can hear me just fine. I have that lovely privilege of having half my presentation already being covered between Andre, Bruno, and Maija, but I'm still going to go ahead and try and sort of place this context of this annual conference. I'm part of the resourcing team, and we had a good long think about what we wanted our opening conference to be about. And we sort of moved towards what drives responsible sourcing at the moment and the tensions that exist within them. Andy, after my presentation, will give you what the project itself is. My job is sort of do the lovely theoretical contextual background to where we are. Could I have the next slide, please? So the central idea behind our conference and our project essentially is, how can the global community around responsible sourcing bring together its experiences and lessons to chart a more cohesive path for the future? Now, if you start breaking that sentence down, there are so many tensions within the framing of that one sentence. Who is the global community? Who has the right to speak for people, for companies, for communities, for labor unions? And how do think tanks and us consultants get involved in this? Do we agree what responsible sourcing is? Do we have a way of saying, yep, that's responsible? Nope, that doesn't meet our criteria. Do we have a right to set the criteria? What have our experiences been? Have we focused too much on the positives and not enough on the negatives? Have we learned from things that do not work as much as we've learned from things that do work? And do we have a cohesive path forward? Are we all just pulling? Do we need to pull together? Do we pull in the same direction? Do we go our separate ways and hope it all comes together towards the end of whenever responsible sourcing is achieved? So within that one sentence, there are already tensions that as a project we're looking at and helping our networks be able to address these. So what I'm going to do is talk about the responsible sourcing complex. Not even a system, it's an entire complex, and figure out where, who, what, why, how. And over the next 2 days, I'm hoping the rest of you will give us the answers to these questions. Next slide, please. So we started with a very simple premise. We said, who are the actors? Who are the people who directly influence responsible sourcing? So obviously it's companies and businesses. And by companies, I not only mean the extractive companies, I'm talking about manufacturing, logistics, recycling, consumer, marketing, investors. So the people who directly have a say in how responsible sourcing takes place. We've got governments, we've got investors, we've got local communities, national communities, and we have labor unions. These are the people who have a direct impact on the processes of responsible sourcing. Next slide, please. And there are your processes. Sometimes set by our actors, sometimes set by third parties. And we have a regular list of standards, due diligence guidelines, regulations, certifications, frameworks. There's an entire host of these processes around. Next slide, please. And the two of them interact. The actors set up processes, the processes influence the actors, it keeps going back and forth. But the question that becomes, where is the accountability? Where is the voice saying, that works, that meets a criteria, that's just greenwashing, that is of no use to anyone? Next slide, please. And we believe the accountability comes from the mitigating factors. These are people who are monitoring and auditing the responsible sourcing complex. This comes through business alliances, through alliances between civil society, local communities, and companies. This comes through government alliances, all sorts of alliances. It comes through the media. Now, whether that's television, newspapers, social media, Twitter, the power of Twitter, where is the media bringing up these cases saying that was done well, good God, look at what a horrible mess this has been. And it comes from civil society itself, NGOs, community members, labor unions, everybody who's working in this. Next slide, please. So your entire complex is three actors: the actors themselves, the people who are the mitigating factors, and the processes interacting with each other and then engaging separately at the same point in time. So you get this entire mess of people coming in, fragmented, defragmented, but that's why we are calling it a complex and no longer just a system. Next slide, please. So what are these guys doing? From the actors, the mitigating factors, and the processes, their entire goal is to come together and implement responsible sourcing. And we haven't, as a community, agreed on what that implementation actually looks like. Is it certification? Is it third-party auditing? Is it the ESG metrics and indicators that are being developed? Is it a reputational assessment of saying that company not doing well, that country not doing well? Europe will be the leaders. God help the US, well, now Joe Biden is there, so hopefully better performance from them on certain issues. But where's the reputational assessment that comes in and saying implementation of responsible sourcing is taking place? Because of changes in laws, legal actions are taking place. Companies are being held to account for their climate records now. They're being taken to account for slave labor, for slave trade. All of these issues are also coming through the legality of taking people to court. And of course, there's regulatory compliance, and the EU far ahead with a lot of actual directives rather than guidelines on how this is going to be done. So we have these three: implementing responsible sourcing, then we decide what responsible sourcing looks like. Next slide, please. And this brings us to the level playing field and the power dynamics that exist within each of these actors and processes. Now, we've talked about the term level playing field. We're saying it's about everybody has the same standard, but is that what a level playing field means? Are we looking at the common lowest denominator, or are we trying to push people to the top of our standards? Does that level playing field mean those who do not have resources to implement responsible sourcing will be given resources by those who do? How does the big mining company do it? How does the small mining company do it? How does the big manufacturer, the automobile maker, compare to the small parts automobile maker? How is the recycler responsible for batteries which he was not consulted on to begin with when recycling was being looked at? So when we talk about level playing field, we have to understand the power dynamics and tensions that exist between the actors and these processes. Now, we all have good intentions, but good intentions are a necessary condition. They're not a sufficient condition by themselves. We have to acknowledge that within our field, the people we speak to, the access to communication channels, the access to government representatives, the access to finance, all impacts how responsible sourcing is being implemented. So when we say level playing field and power dynamics, it is up to us to also understand that there are internal tensions that exist within this lovely concept that we call responsible sourcing. Next slide, please. And within this conference, we're looking at 4 specific areas, and there are plenty more. we're not saying that these are the only 4 important power dynamic level playing field areas, but there are others, which hopefully we can get to in other conferences. But today we're looking at awareness and industry frontrunners. Tomorrow we'll look at regulations and investors. Next slide, please. So here are some of the questions that we're asking about the level playing field and the power dynamics, about implementation. Are there value chain inconsistencies? Is one chain better than the other? Are there inconsistencies within chains? Have we adopted a silo approach? So when we talk about ASM, we only talk about ASM without realizing that they're part of a larger power game. When we're talking about conflict minerals, why are we not considering the same laws for iron ore, for copper, for all the other minerals? When we talk about rare earths, why is China let off? Or people just saying, well, China, we can't really do anything about it, so we're just going to do everything else about it. Are some of the standards and due diligence guidelines that we're using inefficient? Are they creating just more paper? And is this more paper being used for greenwashing? Are we asking a company to fill out 10 different forms, which are essentially the same forms? Are we pushing people towards a lowest common denominator of standards? Are we pushing them to a higher standard of achieving responsible sourcing? Next slide, please. And what about the international element? We know that the European Union is doing a lot on this front, but what about companies which say, not my jurisdiction? If things are happening in Latin America, that's Latin America's concern. As a European, it's not my jurisdiction, which is a fair enough question to ask. Do we really want to invite other people to comment on processes within our own jurisdictions? Have we become European-centric? Have we considered what the partner countries are actually saying? This entire thing with the extractives of not in my backyard, as Maija was talking about, are we exporting the dirty side of this into other countries? How representative is our level playing field? How representative is our concept of a responsible sourcing being implemented? Next slide, please. So at the end of these 2 days, where are we going? What we want to find out is where our common ground is. So much has been done around sustainability and responsible sourcing in the last 10 years. We have achieved something. Can we have an idea of saying, okay, this bit we're all agreed on. Where do we go from after this? What's the next step? What does that look like for different stakeholders? When we prompt collective action, are some of us willing to say, take a critical assessment of what we have achieved so far and admit to ourselves, you know what, that didn't work, or that needs to be re-examined. Just because a guideline has existed for 10 years, is it the right guideline, or does it now need to be updated and made more inclusive? And that is the only way we're going to create lasting change, but it has to be an inclusive change. It cannot just be a European-centric concept. The African and the Latin Americans and the Asia Pacific, the Chinese, everybody needs to have a say in this. But how do we have that say? How do we make this an inclusive aspect, especially since it is Europe who is leading, where everybody else had vacated that global leadership and the Europeans have chosen to take it up? Do we have a right to ask Europe not to be Europe-centric? Or do we have to ask them to be more responsible and include the entire planet in this conversation? So here's the fun bit about doing this keynote. I don't have answers. I am looking for other people to provide those answers. And I hope our 4 sessions with our discussions and our keynotes will help us as a project get to that point. Thank you, Peter.
Masuma, thank you very much. And never have so many pertinent questions been posed in such a succinct presentation. And goodness me, I'm glad that this is I think a 3-year program that's going to allow us to explore some of those issues, but absolutely nail on the head in terms of why we need to draw the conversations together. And maybe all different stakeholders have a bit of humility in listening, exploring, having a curiosity about the pressures on each other so that we can maybe nudge something forward. So Masuma, I know you're very much involved in the whole overall resourcing project and will be with us over these 2 days. So looking forward maybe to prizing 1 or 2 answers from you as well. But for now, thank you so much. And your presentation leads perfectly on to hearing from Andreas Endl, who is coordinator of the resourcing project. So we've heard something of the context, the urgency, the need for progress in this area. You may have heard something about the resourcing project to really try and frame what the resource of resourcing is to enable those conversations. Andy, great to have you with us. I hope you're not too exhausted from having set up this first platform for conversation, but great just to hear a little bit of an overview of how resourcing is going to be a player in trying to nudge all those questions that have been posed, not least by Masuma, forward. Andy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and very warm welcome on behalf of the whole project team to all of you for making to the conference. And I would like really to give you a bit of tour of the resourcing project and see what's really in for you, not only at this conference, but at the project overall. The next slide, please. So resourcing really is a European Commission Horizon 2020 action that kind of frames and accompanies all kinds of policy actions and programs that are related to responsible sourcing, with the ultimate goal to really building a global stakeholder platform for responsible sourcing, creating momentum and creating change in this regard. And we are really a set of partners, people with a diverse set of expertise and also representation of different stakeholder groups that also not only for us are important for the project, but as we incorporate the project itself, because we would like to provide this balanced view that really responds to important societal challenges that are created in this independent and open dialogue as we hear today in the conference. And we started basically about a year ago with first project action, but we will be running and we will be around for another 4 years. And you will get to know partners and different people from the project, I think also during the conference, which we think is one step ahead for being a facilitator for an agenda on responsible sourcing. Next slide, please. Just to briefly summarize, that goes beyond what we are discussing today at the conference. What is really the goal, what resourcing would like to support of? Establish a common responsible sourcing visions for EU industry, and therein also increase the uptake of responsible sourcing practices by individual businesses, but as well as the public policy sector. In addition, also foster what we consider global advocacy for a common definition for responsible sourcing. And as Masuma highlighted, this is important for us to really set a common set of understanding, a common set of rules, what this actually means to bring us forward. And most importantly, I think, is the people surrounding the actors who drive our agenda, because we would like to be a facilitator in building a well-connected and diverse global responsible sourcing community. Next slide, please. So for us, one of the key actions really is to set up responsible sourcing visions for 3 EU key industry sectors, supporting, for example, the Green Deal and other EU policies, which for us is mobility, renewable energy, and electronics. And therein really build roadmaps of how these sectors actually are making a meaningful transition towards responsible sourcing within Europe. And for that part, we very much invite everyone to be part of that vision, both upstream and downstream actors, because we think that is a stakeholder-driven process, and as it should be, in order to really be able to respond to important challenges such as climate change or the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. And I think it's not only important to talk about industry sectors and policies therein. We really would like to help practitioners hands-on get their grips on how responsible sources practices work in the business as well as the public policy sphere. And for that purpose, really engaging in informal expert exchange at different workshops and webinars. We try to really be objective when it comes to what is a good practice, and try to, for you, really design hands-on materials of actually how can you make sense of what is a good practice, how can it help me in my daily work, in my organization, etc. And we would also like to be this very nuts and bolts practices be part of what we think are framework conditions to kind of reflect that how do their roadmaps actually support individual actors on the ground for implementing responsible sources within these 3 EU key industry sectors. Next slide, please. So Europe alone cannot do it, and we also need to look beyond actually what Europe's doing actually has an impact on other parts of the world. And for that purpose, we are also fostering and bringing forward the global advocacy for a common definition of responsible sourcing. And most importantly, I think, consider the impacts of what responsible sourcing means for Europe globally by really looking into 3 major world regions, organizing global advocacy for in these regions, bring forward what it means that a global definition of responsible sourcing should be. And most importantly, there are also other actors around that are much more proficient and much more knowledgeable on the responsible sourcing, and to support these actors within our project actions as good and best as we can. Next slide. And there we are. Yes, it's the project team as well as each and everyone today, but also most importantly, beyond what we're discussing during the next days, that matters for really bringing us forward for this meaningful transition towards responsible sourcing. And a couple of things that are really surrounding what we call the resourcing platform is really to structure the discourse on what's out there in terms of responsible sourcing and help the actors understand in order to really create momentum for change. And also bring to the front some more innovative ways of how we can communicate of why responsible sourcing is important, and also to bring forward the argument why we should do it to create momentum really for actors to kind of take on that journey. And last but not least, I think there will be many more incidences and opportunities for us to network. And today is just one of the very important milestones in the resourcing project, where each and everybody comes together and really kind of brings in their expertise and their view on the project, but also most importantly on the topic of responsible sourcing and the 4 driver changes. And I hope we can meet at one point also in person and shake hands and get together and discuss things. But as it stands right now, we will be here for much more digital interaction. And please shoot us an email, visit our website, and that's it for me. Thank you very much. And you get to know a lot of different people from the resourcing team, I guess, during the next days. That's just a glimpse of our team. And yeah, we look forward to some interesting discussions. And thank you very much. And over to you back, Peter.
Andy, thank you very much. A great introduction, and see this program as an opportunity area for the discussion. But it's not going to be about shoving information out. Well, it is a bit. It's going to be about the conversations. Zoom with a large number has limitations, but immediately before we break for a break, we'd just like to give you a chance. We're going to take a risk. And what we're going to do is we're going to throw you all into a small breakout room with about 5 or 6 of you, really just a chance for all of us as participants, just to say, hello, I'm blah, blah, from where. So if we've got the task up on the screen, please, what we're going to do is to go into some breakout groups, literally just for 10 minutes. When you get in the breakout room, what we'd like you to do is unmute and turn on your camera and just do a brief round of hellos, of introductions, and maybe just share your hopes for the resourcing initiative. So this is partly going to be a test of whether we as a movement have the capacity to talk to each other as well as listen. So as soon as you are able to Heike, everyone grip your seats. You're going to end up in a breakout room for 10 minutes. Say hello to each other, introduce yourselves, and just share a couple of hopes about the resourcing initiative. And then we'll come straight back. So grab your chair, ready, and we'll go into the breakout groups now.
Great.